She got off the train with me and changed my life forever. She sat close to me and said something I'll never forget. Sometimes a stranger changes your life in a way no one familiar ever could. Not because they know you, but because they don't. Because they walk into your story with nothing to prove and no script to follow, and that makes all the difference. My name's Evan. I'm 26. Single. Jobless, not because I got fired or laid off, but because I walked out. I quit a stable marketing job in Chicago not to chase a dream, but to escape a slow death behind a glowing screen. Maybe that sounds dramatic, but if you've ever stared at your life and realized none of it feels like yours, you understand. So I took what little I had, bought a coast-to-coast train pass, and got out. No plans, no destination, just movement. That's how I ended up on a half-empty sleeper car somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, fading into blur outside the window, my body still, my mind racing. I thought I'd have the room to myself. That changed the moment she walked in. She looked like she belonged in a different kind of life. Aviator jacket, sharp eyes, a smirk, like she'd seen the whole world and dared it to blink first. She didn't ask, just dropped her bag and sat down right next to me. And with one sentence, casual, dangerous, unforgettable, she completely disarmed me. Relax, I don't bite. Unless you ask. I laughed. Choked, really. Didn't know what to do with her energy. She introduced herself as Sandra, confident, unfiltered. Something in her eyes said she'd lived through fire and come out the other side more curious than scared. I had no idea how a random train ride was about to rewrite everything I thought I knew about grief connection and what it really means to live. But I remember this. She sat close to me and said something I'll never forget. She didn't ask why I was on the train, not right away. Instead, Sandra pulled out a tiny bottle of bourbon from her bag and took a sip like we were already halfway through a conversation. "So, Evan," she said, resting her head gently against the train wall, "are you running from something or toward something?" The question hit harder than it should have. I tried to laugh it off, mumbled something like, maybe both. She didn't push, just nodded, her eyes drifting out the window as if she already understood. We sat in that sleeper car as dusk melted into night. The train swayed, the world outside turned navy blue, and there we were, two strangers sharing a space that felt too small for silence and too honest for pretense. She told me her husband had died 7 months ago. "I stayed in the house for 6, she said. "This month I'm just moving. No plan. Just movement." I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," was all I managed. She waved it off. "Don't be. I'm not." He was a good man. But life stopped and I didn't want mine to. It was the kind of honesty people don't usually offer to someone they met 30 minutes ago, but that was Sandra. There were no walls, only windows. She shrugged off her jacket, revealing a soft sweater that hugged her in a way I tried not to notice but did. She caught me glancing. She didn't flinch. "You're cute when you're nervous," she teased. "I'm not nervous." She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe a little." I smiled. "Maybe a little." We kept talking, about books, about places. She'd skinny dipped in a lake in Montana once just because no one told her not to. I admitted I'd never even left the Midwest. She said that was a sin. At some point, the lights dimmed and she curled into her bunk feet, bare hair messy. Before closing her eyes, she said, "Sleep tight, Evan." I don't bite, remember. That night I didn't sleep. Not really. The sound of the train felt like a heartbeat. Her presence changed the shape of the room, the rhythm of the air. It was like the gravity shifted. I just didn't know toward what. When I woke up, she was already sitting cross-legged with a cup of train station coffee and a book in her lap. "Good morning, sunshine," she said without looking up. "I got coffee. It's terrible. Want some?" I took a sip. It was worse than terrible. She grinned. "I warned you." And then out of nowhere she said, "You talk in your sleep." I froze. What did I say? Something about not missing your chance. My mouth went dry. Dreaming about someone back home? No. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I guess I just feel like I've been missing a lot of things lately. She looked at me with that same sharp, soft gaze. Yeah, I used to feel that way too. And then she said something I didn't expect. I was a school counselor. 20 years. Helped a lot of kids find their path. Then one day I realized I didn't even have one of my own anymore. She told me her husband had been sick for a long time, that she'd known it was coming. But when it finally happened, she felt nothing but silence. No kids. Not by choice, she added. Just never happened. And when he died, it was just me. And the silence. And eventually the silence got louder than the grief. I didn't interrupt, just listened. And then she said, her voice lighter now. I booked a train, packed a bag, and left. No plan, no healing, just motion. Her story didn't ask for sympathy. It was offered like a gift, a piece of her that she let me hold if only for a moment. She looked at me again and said, "And then I met you." I smiled. "Lucky me." She smirked. "Don't get ahead of yourself." That afternoon we ate in the dining car. She ordered wine at 2 p.m. I got soup that tasted like dishwater. She told me about a solo trip she took to New Mexico where she danced barefoot at a local festival. I told her I once drove 10 hours to meet a girl who ghosted me on arrival. She laughed so hard she nearly choked on her wine. "You're adorable," she said. "So hopelessly romantic it hurts." "I wouldn't say romantic," I said, trying to act casual. "Oh, you would," she replied. "You just don't know it yet." When we got back to the cabin, the sun was melting through the windows. Golden soft. Sandra stood quietly by the door. "I don't know where I'm going," she said. "You said Portland." She shook her head. "That was just a word. I have no one there." "So where?" She turned to me. "Wherever you're going." My heart thudded. "You're serious?" She nodded. "You remind me of who I used to be before I got tired." I didn't know what to say. My mind screamed for caution, but my soul leaned forward. "You don't even know where I'm going." "Then tell me." And I did. A tiny town 2 states away. A place I'd never seen, only heard about once in a postcard from a friend. She didn't hesitate. "Then I guess I'm coming with you." We spent that night in silence again, not because we had nothing to say, but because we didn't need to say anything. The next morning, I thought she'd change her mind. I stood by the door with my bag ready to say goodbye. She stretched, yawned, and said, "You leaving?" "Yeah, this is my stop." She swung her bag over her shoulder. "Cool, I'll grab mine." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "Don't flatter yourself," she said, smirking. "I'm just following my gut. And right now my gut says not to let this one walk off the train alone." We stepped onto the platform like it was the first scene of a film neither of us had auditioned for. The town was barely a town, more like a suggestion of civilization than a destination. A single diner, a gas station, a bus stop bench, and a rusted-out payphone with weeds growing through the cracks. It smelled like old pavement and pine. Sandra stretched, turned her face to the sky, and said, "Smells like nowhere. I love it." We found breakfast in a diner across the street, pancakes, watery coffee, and a waitress who called everyone sweetheart. Sandra had her charmed in under 60 seconds, telling her she looked like Rita Hayworth and asking about her kids. That was her gift. She could pull stories out of people like thread from fabric. Over a third cup of coffee, she leaned in and asked, "How much money do you have?" I laughed. "Why?" "Because I've got enough for maybe 2 nights in a motel and a vending machine dinner. After that, we're camping or stealing muffins." "I'm about the same," I said. "Maybe a hair better." She grinned. "Perfect. I love a challenge." We caught a local bus heading south. No real destination. I told her about a friend who used to live near a national park a few towns over. She shrugged. "Close enough to a plan. It was just us on that bus. No one else. Not even the driver said a word." Sandra leaned her head on my shoulder quietly, humming along to a song playing through her earbuds. I didn't know the song, but her warmth was enough. "I feel like we're in the weirdest movie ever made," she whispered. "Indie film, no budget, no plot." She smiled without opening her eyes. Best kind. That night we found a rundown motel. Flickering neon, only one room left. One bed. "You okay with this?" she asked. I nodded. I was. Though I wasn't sure for what reason. Nervousness. Excitement. Fear of feeling something too real, too fast. Inside the room, she dropped her bag, kicked off her boots, and collapsed on the bed. "God, this is ugly," she said, eyeing the floral curtains. "Yeah, but it's ours for now." I sat in the room's only chair. She rolled on her side, looking at me. "You're gonna sit over there all night?" I shrugged. She tilted her head. "Evan, I'm not trying to trap you. You can lay beside me without it meaning anything, or with it meaning everything. We figure it out minute by minute." There was no seduction in her voice, just honesty, like she'd torn up the rulebook and wasn't interested in playing games. I got in beside her. We didn't touch, didn't speak, just breathed the same air in the quiet glow of a dying motel lamp. Eventually, she whispered, "I'm not used to this." To what, trusting someone this fast? "Me neither," I said. Then she reached for my hand and held it. Nothing more. In the morning, we walked into town looking for food, found a grocery with bruised fruit and canned soup. She talked the clerk into giving us a discount on a loaf of bread and a 6-pack of eggs. "I used to negotiate school budgets," she whispered. "This is child's play." We shared hard-boiled eggs in a park while watching squirrels fight over crumbs. Later that day, I got an email. It was from my old job. They were hiring again. The role I'd left was open. The offer wasn't flashy, but it was solid. Steady. I didn't tell her. That night, we ended up in a bar that smelled like bleach and old cigarettes. She played Fleetwood Mac on the jukebox. Twice. We sat in a booth with sticky seats and shared fries and whiskey. She leaned in and said, "You're not my type, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks." She laughed. "No, it's a compliment. My type's always been buttoned-up men in suits who say the right thing and never show up when it matters." "You're confusing." "Thanks." Again. "You've got this quiet storm thing going on. You look like you're always listening even when you're pretending not to be." We danced that night. Slowly. To a song neither of us knew. She pressed her head against my chest, my arms around her waist, her body light, warm, real. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a memory being created. When we got back to the room, it just happened. No dramatic pause, no grand confession, just motion. Natural, gentle, unforced. She kissed me first. Soft, but sure. Her hands found my shoulders, then my face, like she was remembering something she never had. We didn't say anything after. We just laid there, sheets half on the floor, her fingers tracing shapes on my chest. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah. Not too weird?" She smiled. "No. Just real." That was the thing with Sandra. Everything was real. The moments were lived, not managed. The next morning she didn't change. No weirdness, no questions, just coffee, a stolen hoodie, and a complaint about the vending machine being out of Diet Pepsi. We walked to a farmer's market and split a peach from a smiling vendor she'd somehow charmed in under a minute. That afternoon, I took a photo of her on a bridge. Then she pulled me beside her and said, "Now, one of us together. Proof I existed." Later, she looked at the photo. Didn't say anything, but her eyes said plenty. That week, we started finishing each other's sentences. We knew how the other took their coffee. She liked her feet cold at night. I needed a pillow between my knees to sleep. We made it work. One night we got caught in a thunderstorm. No umbrellas, no shelter, just the two of us soaked and laughing. She danced in the street, hair soaked, face radiant. I stood there watching her, that woman in the rain, not broken, rebuilding. And maybe so was I. She pulled me into a kiss, rain dripping from our faces, her lips warm against mine. It didn't feel like a movie. It felt better. Back in the room, she curled into me. "Are you happy?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "But I'm scared it'll end." "It has to eventually." "I know," she said, "but not yet." That was the silent clock ticking behind everything. Not yet, but soon. In the third week, the money nearly ran out. I still hadn't replied to the job email. Sandra's emergency credit card stayed in her bag. We lived on crackers, borrowed Wi-Fi, and curiosity. We stopped calling it a trip. It was just life. Wake, walk, wander, sleep, repeat. At a lake one evening, we lay on a dock under a sky so full of stars it didn't seem real. This, she whispered, is what peace feels like. I believed her. That night before sleep, she whispered, "Thank you for getting off that train." And I replied, "Thank you for following me." The morning after that night at the lake, things felt heavier. Not bad, just more real. We'd been drifting like leaves on a stream, pretending the current didn't lead anywhere. But it always does, and we both felt it now. Over instant coffee and a bruised banana, Sandra asked, "What would you do if this never ended?" I took a long sip before answering. I'd keep going. With you. Even if we had to sleep in parks and eat gas station crackers forever. She smiled, but there was something behind it. That soft ache of knowing something beautiful can't last. "Me too," she said. "But it has to end, doesn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By then, we were in a town that didn't even have a name on the welcome sign, just a number and the word county. We stayed above a diner that smelled like onions and old grease. The owner gave us a discount because Sandra told him she used to counsel kids with addiction. She wasn't lying, just omitting. We spent our days walking dusty roads, our nights wrapped in each other under thrift store blankets. It was all so quiet, so far from what life used to be. But the emails kept coming. From my old job, from my landlord, from reality. On the fifth unread email, Sandra caught me staring at my phone. "You gonna answer that?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than I was ready to say. We kept moving. Found a bus to a city that felt too loud, too bright after all the silence. We didn't talk much during the ride, just held hands. Her thumb traced tiny circles against my palm, a rhythm that said, "I'm here." For now. That night, we stayed in the cheapest room we could find. The walls were thin, the air conditioner didn't work, but it didn't matter. We lay in bed, limbs tangled, the city noise humming in the background like distant waves. "I booked a flight," she said. My breath caught. Seattle, then Tokyo. I always wanted to see cherry blossoms in the spring. I didn't know what to say, so I kissed her shoulder instead. She turned to face me. "You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for a promise or a plan. Just, let this be good." "It is," I whispered. "It's the best thing I've ever had." The morning came too fast. We packed slowly, like folding shirts would somehow stretch time. When we left, we didn't talk about it. We just walked, through the station, past the schedules, toward a bench beneath a tree. "I'm going to miss this," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. "I think I'll go back to Chicago," I finally said, "at least for a while. Figure things out." She nodded. "That makes sense. Just don't forget this. Don't forget me." I reached across the table, took her hand. I couldn't if I tried. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. Email, Instagram, and the name of a bookstore in Kyoto I've dreamed of visiting for 15 years, just in case. I laughed. In case you ever feel like running again." When the taxi came, she stood, wrapped her arms around me like she was memorizing the shape of my back. "Don't waste too much time back there," she whispered. "I won't." Then she was gone. I stayed on that bench for what felt like an hour, holding the piece of paper, watching the empty sidewalk, letting the memory of her settle in the space she'd just left. 6 months later, I'm back in Chicago. Different apartment, same city. I took the job. It's not forever, I tell myself that every morning. But I show up, I cook, I sleep, I laugh sometimes. There's a bag always packed in the closet, just in case. I haven't messaged Sandra. She hasn't messaged me either. And that's okay, because we didn't leave anything unsaid. We lived a full story in those few weeks, richer than most people get in a decade. And sometimes on quiet nights, I unfold that paper. The edges are soft now. The ink is smudged. But I still read it. and I still believe it. That some people walk into your life like a storm and leave you rebuilt. She sat close to me on a train and changed everything. It's strange how someone can pass through your life for just a moment and still leave footprints deeper than those who've been walking beside you for years. Sandra didn't rescue me. I wasn't broken when I met her, just misaligned, out of rhythm with myself. But what she gave me was something I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from quitting your job or leaving your city, but the kind that shows up when you stop performing a version of yourself that no longer fits. The kind that says it is okay to change your mind, to run, to stop, to feel again. With Sandra, every minute was honest, raw, unsanitized. We didn't talk about forever. We didn't define what we were. We simply existed fully and without apology. And maybe that's what made it so unforgettable. It wasn't a love story in the traditional sense. It was something wilder, softer, more sacred. A connection that doesn't end with distance because it was never about geography. She reminded me how to listen to someone else, yes, but more importantly to myself. Now, months later, the world feels different. Not because it changed, but because I did. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you only need one person to look at you like you're worth knowing, to finally believe you are. If you've ever met someone who shifted your axis even slightly, someone who made you remember who you could be, hold on to that. Even if you never speak again. Even if it was brief. Because not everything real has to be permanent to matter. What about you? Have you ever met someone who sat beside you and changed the course of your life without meaning to? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this resonated with you even just a little, please give this video a like. It helps us keep telling stories that don't always fit the mold, but still deserve to be told. Subscribe for more raw human stories with unexpected turns. And remember, life doesn't always give us closure, but sometimes it gives us clarity, and that's enough. Until the next journey.